Hello, everyone. My name is Debra Bachar from Blueberry Business Group, and I'm happy to join you today. Welcome to you all, and many thanks to NAFS, to Bob, Aaron, and Ed for inviting me to speak with you and for your help. What a great association. Today for this session, we'll be discussing food and flavor in the post-COVID world. Make no mistake, the human toll and the economic fallout from the pandemic will be unlike any other in modern history. The food industry has been hit especially hard by the virus, and we do not expect to know or understand the full effects or chain of events and consequences for at least another year. The issue we face today as an industry and as individual companies is great uncertainty. The natural question then for food and flavor companies, in fact, all companies, is where do we go from here? Here's what we will talk about today. We will review and discuss the unfamiliar landscape with an overview of the pandemic and industry impacts. We will discuss the changing role of food with consumer self-care. And finally, ESG, risks, returns, and ethics, sustainability 3.0 or even 4.0. There was an endless number of topics to choose from and to go deep with, but we limited ours to 3 for good reason. This is the most challenging time we faced in a generation, and we'll be dealing with it for years. In fewer than 90 days, our industry went from a supply economy to a demand economy, from an overrun of product supply to products placed on shelves to meet the radical demand of stockpiling consumers, while restaurant menus paused or in too many cases disappeared altogether. Every food business, every industry is and will continue to be impacted by what's transpired. But before we begin our presentation, a few caveats. We're living in a world of unknowns and contradictions. For every fact or point of view, there's another opposing fact or point of view, making truth very hard to find. At the end of 2018, my company, Blueberry Business Group, went on record to declare the end of the food industry as we all knew it. In 2019, CEOs of big food companies publicly acknowledged unprecedented changes in the operating environment. Then came 2020 and COVID-19, and for many companies, 5 years of gains were lost in 3 months. For others, sales and market share surged as consumers suddenly viewed food through a lens of personal safety, family security, and personal comfort through familiarity. Many parts of the world, including parts of North America, went into lockdown. Others did not. Schools were closed while others remained open. Businesses were shuttered or went virtual. Air travel, theater movies, July fireworks, concerts, and state fairs stopped or were canceled altogether. Yet researchers, big consulting firms, economists, and others started predicting the post-COVID world as early as March, only to be proven wrong and premature. At the same time in March, experts said the virus will be over by spring. Spring came and went, and the predictions became the virus will be over in summer. It's now autumn, and we're without a vaccine. The virus is mutating. Hotspots keep popping up, and for some markets, a second wave. Unemployment numbers are heartbreaking. Social and civil unrest captures headlines, and climate change is frightening the world. All of this has and continues to wreak havoc on people and on businesses. So then, this presentation is not to predict the future, but to help your organization prepare for it. This leads us to our first topic, a deeper dive into an unfamiliar landscape. Just as 2018 represented a shift in the industry structure, that is to say, a change in the way the industry works, just 18 months later, and we're experiencing another shift. Exponential and progressive technologies, economies, economics, new sources of capital, labor availability, skills and costs, corporate debt, shifting profit pools, all of these have been accelerated by COVID-19. What's noteworthy is that these dramatic shifts were driven by 2 factors: the way consumers live, work, and play, and the way businesses do business. Unfortunately, there's no history to look to identify with certainty or permanence of demand or behavior. And as mentioned, the pandemic response, the stay-at-home orders, the rate of virus occurrence, and the timing of outbreaks differ across geographies and micro-markets. These variables continue to make forecasting more complex, granular, and impossible to generate. The sheer velocity of our world and industry is mind-blowing. Pre-COVID, we formalized that profound social and cultural shifts, times the relentless race of technology innovation, times the rate of consumer adoption, was delivering 10 years of progress in 2 years. Today, mid-COVID, the same formula is in many cases delivering 10 years of progress in just 6 months or less, arriving quicker than anyone expected, even as the rest of the world seems frozen. Many food manufacturers and processors representing your customers took necessary action to shore up their financials in the early days of the pandemic. Since then, they've been reporting on what they've done to meet conditions, but most say very little about what they will be doing going forward. For food and flavoring companies, what does this philosophy mean for you? It means doing 2 important things at once. 1, maintaining a strong footing in the present by executing against your customers' day-to-day needs, while at the same time, placing a foot in securing your future by testing, experimenting, and innovation at lowest possible cost in preparation for tomorrow. As the food industry continued to change and evolve, Blueberry Business Group saw the need to make sense of what was happening and could happen. In July of this year, we created 4 plausible scenarios along 2 dimensions: the duration of the pandemic and the length of an economic downturn. Note the 4 scenarios. Scenario 1, uncontained virus, severe and persistent economic slump. Scenario 2, uncontained virus, rapid economic recovery. Scenario 3, eradicated virus, severe and persistent economic slump. And scenario 4, eradicated virus, rapid economic recovery. Now, I won't spend time reading this slide, but as of today, it's fair to say that we are experiencing the elements primarily in scenario 1. As best case, a vaccine will be proven safe and effective early in 2021. It will take time to ramp up production and distribution. We expect it will be another year before consumers feel comfortable returning to normal life, dining out, enjoying entertainment, sporting events, and more adventure with food. In any event, the effects on the people, the economy, and businesses will be different in 30 days, different in 60 days, and different again in 90 days. Over time, conditions should progress from the far left of this slide to the far right. We recommend your company similarly maps 4 plausible scenarios along the 2 dimensions of virus duration and economic fallout. Then scope corresponding effects on consumer behaviors, on the world, on the food industry, and on your organization. These are best guesses that will enable your organization to visualize, mobilize, and plan against plausible impacts, positive or negative, as they occur. You may want to list second and third order effects. In other words, the chain of effects launched by just one. No right or wrong answers, just thinking beyond today and imagining a plausible future that has no bias or self-interest, just reality, pleasant or unpleasant. New channel economics. There have been implications for food and flavor companies. For example, restaurants open and closed again, reducing the menu to try to manage costs. Chains are doing better than independent restaurants. Rapid inventory returns become the rule for the shelf and in warehouses. High unemployment is driving more consumers to purchase food in bulk and trading national brands for better value store brands. Manufacturers cut costs and SKUs to streamline operations to focus on high demand items. The sales spike reported over the last few quarters could be temporary as consumers revert to the need for more variety and choice. Many manufacturers pulled back on innovation and R&D due to the low ROI and channel complexity. And while it's not listed here, many companies are saddled with accounts receivables that will need to be written off due to cash flow problems in the supply and value chains. In a word, everybody seems to owe everybody. If you're experiencing cash flow issues from your customers or demands for extended terms, you're not alone. A look at the landscape provides a few thought starters. The rate of velocity and change could result in organizations giving too much power to the buyers, with a bias for taking care of business right now. Remember, in 90 days, the industry will look different than today, and even more so in 180 days. So a few questions you may want to ask yourself as an organization. Does the future of our organization need more attention? Are we burning too much adrenaline on current things, even wrong things? How can we prepare for an unknown future? There are others, of course. These are just starters. Moving on to topic 2, consumer self-care. Healthy food, clean label, yes, yes, and so much more. Pandemic effects are far-reaching and experienced very personally by each consumer, spilling over into every food industry company. The need for certainty drives questions that come our way almost daily. When will food service rebound? What's the future of grocery? How many companies will survive? We've offered our views in various press releases and commentaries, but as we keep saying, the future is hard to predict. Sad to say that the pandemic, lockdowns, and other crises have produced phobias, omnias, and overweight bodies. Coronaphobia is the fear, emotional, and social strain experienced by the general public, resulting in obsessive behaviors, distress, avoidance, panic, anxiety, hoarding, paranoia, and depression. 1 in 3 Americans are suffering from stress or anxiety. Weight gain from available junk food for comfort on top of low energy and low activity during lockdown is another feature. And sleep is suffering, creating a population of chronic insomniacs, resulting in reduced productivity, shorter fuses, hypertension, depression, and more. If you've been keeping up with the news, as I know you have, and even as you may have witnessed in personal and business life, these conditions are running rampant throughout individuals, families, communities, and workplaces. IRI reports that 9 out of 10 U.S. consumers practice some form of self-care, but will seek solutions to meet a growing number and variety of wants and needs. They say to themselves, I need to tend to my inner self. The world is confusing and an unjust place. No more frozen pizzas and canned soup. This opportunity is not to be missed, but the economics of expanding shelf-care food and products is somewhat costly and return prohibitive right now for some national brands, which makes right now the ideal time for food and flavor companies to continue working on new physical, emotional, and mental health halos for some national, store, and private brands to address consumer needs, a few outlined in the previous slides. Here's what a few of these needs might look like. Well-shaped to offset the signs of aging in skin, hair color, and appearance. Well-being to find inner balance, calm, natural beauty. The need for trust via ingredient transparency and ethical sourcing and social consciousness. Ethical food choices aligned with personal values. The knowledge of sleep deprivation drove Pepsi to develop Driftwell as the fastest new product launch in the company's history. You may know about Tropicana's sensory beverages, CBD gummies, night food ice cream, and Dream Water. We will see new positioning of common ingredients marketed for their self-care properties. And as you probably know, some ingredient companies are expanding beyond food categories into new arenas such as beauty products. In the end, self-care flips the consumer question, going from what do you have for me to what can you do for me, with functional benefits beyond pre-COVID imagination. If you remember nothing else in this presentation, please remember this slide. The consumer question has flipped from what do you have for me to what can you do for me. And now just a word about value-based brands. Although many national brands are reluctant to invest in innovation and R&D at this time, supermarkets and food service distributors are expanding their store and private brand offerings to capture a larger percent of sales as key margin generators of their total offerings. According to marketing professor J.B. Steenkamp, estimated share of store brands will rise to 25% of all grocery sales this year. Food service distributors maintain their goal to keep private brands at least 40% of their total sales. Kroger store brands exceeded $23.1 billion in 2019. Target's new Good and Gather brand will have added 2,000 store brand items just this year. Albertsons brands have exceeded 25% of their total sales, according to Nielsen. While the limited assortment deep discounters in Germany do not share their sales figures, their unit growth and reputation for high-quality private brands that make up over 90% of their sales speaks for themselves. The newcomer Lidl will have opened 100 new stores in 2020 in North America. Aldi will have 2,600 stores. This is a tremendous opportunity for food and flavor companies to keep store brand manufacturers in their line of sight. Grocery channels cannot extract more margin from national brands, and they would welcome the uniqueness and differentiation of self-care products driven by the food science of the food and flavor company and communities. So the big thought starters for this section are that self-care will continue to evolve as people experience effects of COVID trauma for years. They are redefining what it means to take care of ourselves. And by the way, self-care is no longer practiced by white affluent women. It is being embraced by men, by minorities, and all generations. While not a substitute for medicine, food and flavor companies are ideal explorers of this new category. The questions to ask yourself as an organization: can we get a head start on this newly defined category? Can we gain competitive advantage before there's no shortage of choices? And can we explore new strategic partnerships if our current capabilities or expertise is somewhat limited? Let's talk about ESG, the risks, returns, and ethics. COVID-19 has raised awareness from consumers, corporations, investors, and stakeholders about the world we live in. No longer just a service to the community. It takes doing well by doing good for companies and sends it into the stratosphere. It's a basis for returns on investor money by looking at corporations, including and beyond usual financial performance, to a company's environmental, social, and governance goals, tying those goals into long-term value for investors. We can expect ESG to be linked to bank loans to drive value around ESG factors. For example, lowering interest rates and covenant terms when goals are achieved, or increasing interest rates and covenant terms if companies fail to achieve their ESG targets. ESG is an advanced form of sustainability and consciousness that has a direct bearing on food and flavor companies. Your manufacturer or processor customers and the channels they serve will be increasingly called upon to disclose their supply chain practices as part of ESG disclosures per the new reporting framework issued by the World Economic Forum. Customers and channels will determine which standards and practices they will expect their food and flavor suppliers to meet and to ensure alignment, efficient reporting, and compliance across the supply chain. While we're still in the early stages of ESG conformance, it's been a work in progress for years, and until now without measurement. Soon to be adopted is mainstream. The top 4 financial firms have gotten behind the standards and scoring produced by the World Economic Forum. This slide contains links to various sites that explain ESG to help you become informed and prepare, as ESG is at the threshold of the food and beverage industry. Last year, Blueberry Business Group engaged with the Global Food Ethics and Policy Program at the Johns Hopkins Berman Institute of Bioethics and the Bloomberg School of Public Health. A different approach to ESG. This group identified core ethical commitments in great detail beyond what you see here. At the meetings we attended at Johns Hopkins University, representatives from brands and supermarkets were present and confirmed the rising interest from consumers for information about product sources and practices of various brands. I would suggest clicking the link to learn about what this program is all about and the details under each ethical commitment listed here. While I don't think it's as widespread as the World Economic Forum's program, we can all expect to see variations of ESG as they relate to growing consumer concerns arising from COVID-19 and related crises around issues such as public health, labor, upstream farmers, ranchers, fishers, and of course, the environment. So then, thoughts to think and center your company's ideas around is the emerging impact on ESG issues as having a direct impact on financial and investment outcomes. Note that Nelson Peltz's Trian Investment already reports on Cisco's ESG standards in their quarterly reports. Questions to ask your organization include, are we educating ourselves on the details of ESG standards and their potential impacts on our business? Do we know what ESG standards our customers may or should adopt? What do ESG practices say or not say about our products that help or hinder our competitive advantage? And are we building confidence from our customers, investors, their customers, communities, bankers, lenders, and employees? In summary, besides the human trauma and tragedy, COVID-19 has caused an economic shock 3 times worse than the 2008 financial crisis. Leaders of winning food and flavor companies will show ambition to think outside of their own products, transactions, and productivity during this unprecedented time. They will outmaneuver the crisis by executing brilliantly on customer needs now while mapping scenarios to prepare for the future. Efficiency and control have their place for predictable environments only. This is not a particular predictable environment. The speed of change demands a willingness to test and experiment in areas that are not necessarily staring us in the face. Big problems need big solutions. Food and flavor companies are a positive force in support of change and represent the future of the food industry. Thank you very much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. Here is my contact information, and information about my companies can be found at our website. I would invite you to give me a call or send me an email to share your points of view on this presentation or to ask any questions. Meanwhile, I look forward to joining you in the breakout room shortly. Until then, I'll close this presentation and say bye for now.